I was lying in a hospital bed fighting cancer, while my husband was in someone else's bed. I found out on a Wednesday. Not because he told me. Not because someone came to my hospital room with a conscience and a phone full of screenshots. I found out because he forgot. He forgot that sick people have nothing to do but notice things. That when you're lying in a hospital bed at 2 a.m. with a chemo drip in your arm and nowhere to be and nothing to distract you, you notice everything. The way his text changed tone. The way he started stepping out of the room to take calls. The way he visited less. Then less. Then less again. I noticed all of it. I just didn't say anything yet. Because I was busy trying not to die. And because I had learned, very quietly, in that hospital bed, that there is a particular kind of power in knowing something someone doesn't know you know. I decided to use it. My name is Maya. I'm 38 years old. I was diagnosed with breast cancer 14 months ago. Stage 2. Caught early enough to fight. Hard road. Real road. But a road with an end that wasn't a funeral. I was married to Ryan for 7 years. 7 years of what I thought was a partnership. A real one. Built on something solid. I was wrong. But here's what cancer teaches you. When everything else falls away, you see very clearly what was actually there. And what was never there at all. Let me tell you about Ryan first. Because you need to understand what he presented himself as before you understand what he actually was. Ryan was a financial analyst. Smart. Composed. Good at appearing dependable. He gave the impression of a man who handled things. Who showed up. Who could be counted on. We met through mutual friends at a dinner party 7 years ago. He was charming that night. Attentive. The kind of man who makes you feel like the only person in the room. I didn't know then that he made a lot of women feel that way. I found out the hard way. The first 5 years were fine. Not extraordinary. But fine. We built a life. Bought a condo. Talked about the future. Made plans. The ordinary architecture of a marriage. Year 6 things shifted. He started traveling more for work. Coming home later. More distracted. More absent in the specific way that people are absent when their attention is somewhere else entirely. I noticed. I told myself it was work stress. I told myself marriages have seasons. I was good at telling myself things. The diagnosis difficult. Real. Ryan came to the first appointment with me. Held my hand in the waiting room. Said the right things. We will get through this. I'm not going anywhere. You're the strongest person I know. I believed him. Because that's what you do when you're terrified and the person next to you is saying the right things. You believe them. The first 2 months of treatment. He was present. Mostly. Drove me to some appointments. Made dinner when I couldn't stand long enough to cook. Sat with me on the bad nights. Not perfectly. Not always. But enough that I didn't see what was coming. Month 3 of treatment is when things changed. The visits to the hospital got shorter. He started having work emergencies on treatment days. Would show up an hour late. Or not at all. Would text instead of calling. Would call instead of coming. I told myself he was overwhelmed. That watching someone you love go through this is its own kind of trauma. I made excuses for him. Because I was exhausted and sick and didn't have the energy to also be suspicious. But it gets worse. Month 4. I was 3 days post-chemo. The worst 3 days of the cycle. The days when everything hurts and nothing stays down and the world reduces itself to the distance between the bed and the bathroom. Ryan came to visit. Stayed 40 minutes. Said he had a work call he couldn't miss. Kissed me on the forehead. Left. His phone buzzed on the chair beside me as he walked out. He didn't notice he'd left it. I looked at the screen. A message preview. From a contact saved as L. Miss you already. Tonight? I picked up the phone. Read the thread? I want to be clear, I was not snooping. He left his phone in a hospital room where his wife was lying in a bed with a chemo port in her chest. I read what was there. Her name was Lauren. A colleague from his firm. The thread went back 4 months. 4 months. Month 1 of my treatment. While I was learning what stage 2 meant. While I was deciding between lumpectomy and mastectomy. While I was losing my hair in clumps in the shower. Ryan was starting something with Lauren. Hotel names. Dates. Times. Plans made while I was in treatment. Things said that I cannot unread. I put the phone back exactly where it was. Lay back on the pillow. Stared at the ceiling. and felt something I did not expect. Not devastation. Clarity. The same cold. I said, "Go. I'll sleep." He kissed my forehead again. Left. And I lay in that hospital bed. And I started planning. The next morning I called my sister Priya. She picked up immediately. "Maya. What's wrong?" I told her everything. The phone. The thread. Lauren. 4 months. She was quiet for a long time. Then, "What do you need?" Not, "Are you sure?" Not, "Maybe there's an explanation." Just, "What do you need?" That's Priya. I said, "I need an attorney. A good one. And I need you to not say a word to anyone until I tell you to." She said, "Done." Her name was Anita Sharma. Family law attorney. 12 years of experience. Recommended by Priya's colleague. Sharp, direct, and completely unbothered by complicated situations. I called her from my hospital room the next day. Told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "I want to be clear about one thing first. Are you okay? Medically?" I said, "Treatable. Fighting it." She said, "Good. Then let's talk about everything else." Here is what Anita and I built over the next 6 weeks. 6 weeks of planning. While I went to treatment. While Ryan visited with his 40-minute appearances and his forehead kisses. While he texted Lauren from the parking lot of my hospital. While I smiled and said I was tired and told him to go home. The assets. Ryan and I had joint accounts. A condo. Investments. His 401k, partially marital property depending on contributions during the marriage. My own savings, separate, in my name, mostly untouched. Anita walked me through every piece. What was mine? What was ours? What he might try to claim. What we could document. My inheritance. My mother had passed 2 years earlier. Left me a significant amount. Property in her name that I had inherited. Anita confirmed, inherited assets kept separate are not marital property. I had kept my mother's money in a separate account. Never commingled with our joint finances. Anita made sure the documentation was airtight. Ryan had no claim to it. Not a dollar. The affair documentation. Anita referred me to an investigator. His name was Sanjay. Former law enforcement. Methodical. Discreet. I gave him the information from Ryan's phone. Lauren's name. The timeline. He took it from there. 3 weeks of work. Timestamps. Hotel records. A complete documented pattern. The affair confirmed. The dates confirmed. The duration, 4 months and counting, confirmed. Here's what Anita. Starting in month 1. Anita said, "Judges are human. This context matters." She was right. It would matter. The dissipation argument. Sanjay had documented hotel expenditures. Dinners. Gifts. Ryan had been using our joint credit card for some of it. Not all. But some. Enough. Anita calculated it. Documented it. Categorized it as dissipation of marital assets. Money from our shared finances spent on an affair conducted while his wife was in cancer treatment. It was a compelling argument. It would become a compelling argument in front of a judge. I also updated my will. Previous will, everything to Ryan. Standard. What you do. New will, everything to Priya. The inheritance. My savings. My share of the condo equity. My life insurance beneficiary, changed from Ryan to Priya. All of it done quietly. All of it done legally. All of it done while Ryan was visiting me for 40 minutes at a time and texting Lauren from parking lots. 6 weeks after I found the phone. Anita told me everything was in order. The documentation was complete. The will was updated. The life insurance was redirected. The divorce petition was drafted and ready. She said, "When do you want to file?" I said, "After my next scan." She said, "Why then?" I said, "Because I want to know where I stand medically before I blow up my personal life." She said, "Fair." The scan was on a Thursday. Dr. Reena, my oncologist, called me the next morning. She said, "Maya, the scan looks encouraging. The tumor is responding. We keep going, but the direction is good." I said, "Thank you." Hung up. Called Anita. Said, "File today." Ryan was at work when the papers were served. He called me from his car. I was at home. Just back from a short walk, the first one in weeks where I hadn't needed to stop halfway. His voice was tight. "Maya. I just got served with divorce papers." I said, "Yes." "Why?" I said, "Check the grounds." Silence. Long silence. Then, how long have you known? I said, long enough to be prepared. He said, Maya, we need to talk. I said, Anita Sharma is my attorney. You'll want to get your own representation. This is going to move. He said, Maya, please. I said, Ryan? I have to go. And I hung up. He came home that evening. I was on the couch. He stood in the doorway. Looked at me. The way you look at someone when you're trying to figure out how much they know. I looked back. Come. He sat down across. Yes. While you were in treatment. Yes. He said, that's. I said, thorough? He didn't respond. I said, Anita will present the documentation during proceedings. The dissipation argument. The marital misconduct. The context, that this began in month 1 of my cancer treatment, will be before the judge. He said, you planned all of this. I said, you gave me 6 weeks to plan while you were visiting me for 40 minutes at a time. He tried. He said he was sorry. He said he had panicked. He said watching me be sick had been too hard. He said Lauren had just been there. He said it didn't mean anything. I listened to all of it. Then I said, Ryan, I was lying in a hospital bed fighting cancer. And you were in someone else's bed. There is no version of that sentence that ends with a conversation I'm interested in having. He said, so that's it? I said, that's it. He asked about the condo. I told him what Anita had prepared. He asked about the joint accounts. I told him. He asked about my mother's inheritance. I said, separate property. Never commingled. You have no claim. He stared at me. You protected it. Yes. Before all of this? My mother left it to me. I was always going to protect it. He said, what about the life insurance? I said, updated. He understood what that meant. His face did something complicated. I watched it happen. Said nothing. The divorce proceedings took 5 months. 5 months of documents and negotiations and the slow machinery of dismantling 7 years. Ryan hired an attorney. Anita was better. I had better documentation. And I had something Ryan did not have. The moral weight of the circumstances. A wife in cancer treatment. A husband who began his affair in month 1 of that treatment. Judges are human. Anita was right. It mattered. The condo. We had bought it together 5 years ago. My contributions to the down payment had been larger. Documented. My contributions to the mortgage, also larger, because my income had been higher for 3 of those 5 years. Documented. The misconduct documentation supported the argument for a favorable split. Ryan's share of the equity was significantly less than he expected. The joint accounts. The dissipation argument held. $6,200 in documented expenditures from our joint credit card. Hotels. Dinners. A piece of jewelry I found in the records that I had never seen. Traceable. Documented. Irrefutable. Anita presented it cleanly. Ryan's attorney argued it was minor. Anita argued it was the principal. And the context, the argument failed. My mother's money stayed mine. Completely. Here's what else happened. Lauren. I had not planned to do anything about Lauren directly. But Priya, who had been sitting on this information for 5 months and had the restraint of a saint, had a moment. She ran into Lauren at a professional event. Same industry. Different firms. Priya did not make a scene. She simply introduced herself. Said, I'm Maya's sister. I think you know who Maya is. Lauren went pale. Priya said, she's in remission now. In case you were wondering. And walked away. I did not ask Priya to do this. I also did not tell her not to. Lauren's position at Ryan's firm became uncomfortable after that. Not because of anything formal. But because word moves. It always moves. By the time the divorce was finalized, several people at Ryan's firm knew the shape of the situation. A colleague who had been with a married man whose wife was in cancer treatment. That shape has a particular weight in professional environments. Lauren requested a transfer to a different office 4 months after the divorce was filed. The request was granted. She was gone before the proceedings ended. Ryan's professional situation. He kept his job. His income. His career was largely intact. That's the honest answer. He didn't lose everything professionally. But he lost the respect of people who knew. And in a field built on trust and relationships. That has its own cost. A slow one. but real. The divorce was finalized on a Friday afternoon. Anita called me. Said, "It's done." I said, "Thank you." She said, "You were the most prepared client I've had in 12 years." I said, "I had time to prepare. I was in a hospital bed for 6 weeks with nothing to do." She said, "How are you feeling? Medically?" I said, "Scan last week was good. Still in remission." She said, "Good. Take care of yourself." I said, "That's exactly what I'm doing." Priya picked me up from the attorney's office. We drove to our favorite restaurant. Sat across from each other. Ordered wine, the first glass I'd had in 14 months. She raised her glass. Said, "To you." I said, "To being done." We drank. Sat in comfortable silence. The kind that only exists between people who have been through something real together. Ryan called once after the finalization. I let it go to voicemail. He said he was sorry. He said he hoped I was okay. He said he had made the worst mistake of his life. I listened to the voicemail once. People ask me if I'm angry. The honest answer is, not really. Not anymore. I was angry for about 3 weeks after I found the phone. Then something shifted. Maybe it was the chemo. Maybe it was the fact that when you are fighting for your life, anger is a luxury you cannot afford. It takes energy. Energy I needed for other things. So I put the anger down. And picked up a plan instead. And the plan served me far better than the anger ever could have. Here is what I learned about silent legal revenge. It is not about punishing the other person. It is about protecting yourself so completely. So thoroughly. So precisely. That when the dust settles, you are standing on solid ground. And they are standing in the rubble of the choices they made. Not because you pushed them into the rubble. Because the rubble is simply what their choices built. You just made sure none of it landed on you. 14 months after the diagnosis. Here is where we all are. Me, remission. New apartment, mine, just mine, quiet and exactly what I need. Still seeing Dr. Rina every 3 months. Numbers good. Energy returning slowly. Working again, part-time still but growing. Priya 3 miles away. We have dinner every Sunday. The inheritance intact. The life insurance redirected. Everything my mother left me, safe, protected, untouched by someone who didn't deserve it. Ryan, new apartment across the city. His career continuing. His life continuing. Smaller than he planned for. Without me in it. Without my mother's money in it. Without the version of the future he assumed was waiting for him. Lauren, different office. Different city from what I hear. Gone from the story the way people who were never really in it tend to go. Someone asked me recently. Was it worth it? The planning. The secrecy. Going through treatment while managing all of that. I thought about it. Then I said, the treatment was going to happen regardless. The cancer didn't care about my marriage. I was going to be in that hospital bed either way. The planning gave me something to focus on. Something I could control when everything else was out of my control. Was it worth it? I looked at them. I came out of the hardest year of my life with my health, my mother's inheritance, my dignity, and my sister. Ryan came out of it with less than he came in with. You tell me. They asked, do you think he loved you? I thought about that one longer. Then I said, I think he loved the version of me that was healthy and functional and easy to be with. I think when I became sick and difficult and real, he found someone else to be with instead. That's not love. That's convenience. She was right. Priya stayed. Dr. Rina stayed. The 2 friends who drove me to appointments when Ryan had work calls, they stayed. Ryan was passing through. I just didn't know it until the hard part came. The cancer tried to take something from me. Ryan tried to take something from me. Neither of them succeeded. What I have now is smaller than what I thought I was building. But it is real. It is solid. It is mine. Built on what actually held. Not on what I hoped would hold. There is one more thing. One thing I haven't said yet. The night before my last major scan. The one where Dr. Rina told me the word remission. I was alone in my apartment. New place. Quiet. Mine. I sat on the floor of my bedroom. And I cried. Not about Ryan. Not about the affair. Not about the divorce. I cried because I was scared. Because scans are scary. Because no matter how prepared you are. No matter how many attorneys and investigators and documents you have in order. The night before a scan you are just a person. Sitting on a floor. Hoping. And the next morning. Dr. Rina said the word. And I called Priya. And she cried. And I let her. Because some things deserve tears. Not the betrayal. Not the affair. Not Ryan. But this. This deserved tears. He thought I was too sick to notice. He thought cancer had taken my clarity. He was wrong. It gave me more clarity than I have ever had in my life. I saw exactly what he was. Exactly what I had. Exactly what needed to be done. And I did it. Quietly. While fighting for my life. Both battles. I won both.